But who really was Robinson Crusoe? Welcome to Collapse, where history comes alive and every video immerses you in the fate of those who shaped the world. Today, let's set sail for a deserted island, whipped by winds and waves, where a solitary man learns to survive with almost nothing. Robinson Crusoe, the hero of Daniel Defoe's novel published in 1719, has become the archetype of the shipwrecked man, inventive and resilient in the face of the wild nature. But behind the fiction, one question remains. Did Robinson really exist? But before embarking on a new adventure, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to not miss anything. Thank you, and have a nice trip. In the second half of the 17th century, the balance of maritime powers shifted. England, buoyed by an expanding fleet, took advantage of the weakening of Spain and Portugal, crippled by economic and political difficulties. The Dutch republics became a major player in international trade thanks to their prosperous ports and their trading network. This reconfiguration occurred through conflicts, alliances, and rivalries, notably the wars between England and the Netherlands. The Atlantic became the main theater of confrontations, where control of maritime routes and strategic zones ensured power. London, Plymouth, and Amsterdam continuously developed faster and better equipped ships, while English and Dutch geographers and adventurers perfected their maps to reinforce their dominance. In 1648, the Treaty of Westphalia ended the 30 Years' War and established freedom of the seas. No state could claim exclusivity over a vast maritime expanse. This principle, supported by the English and the Dutch, undermined the old Iberian claims. Spain and Portugal saw their exclusive rights challenged and gradually lost their lead. In this context, chartered companies multiplied. Governments granted them regional monopolies in exchange for military participation. The French tried to adopt this model, but their maritime ambitions remained limited by the continental wars of Louis XIV. From 1652, the Anglo-Dutch Wars marked the decline of Iberian powers and brought Dutch trade to the forefront before England took the lead. The Dutch republics defended their Dutch East India Company, VOC, while England reinforced its presence in the Indian Ocean through its East India Company. In the Atlantic, the two nations clashed over fishing in Newfoundland, the slave trade, spices, and sugar. Each naval victory or port capture shifted the balance of power. Portugal, long sustained by Brazilian gold, now had to give way to more aggressive competitors eating away at its African and Asian colonies. Alongside the tensions, a scientific and cartographic revolution unfolded. Advances in astronomy allowed approximate latitude location with the sextant, still in refinement, and the calculation of the height of stars. Longitude remained a complex problem. Without accurate chronometers, navigators relied on dead reckoning, approximate calculations based on speed, course, and duration of the journey. This imprecision led many sailors to jealously guard their secrets of navigation, such as empirical knowledge of currents, trade winds, and seasons, to gain an advantage in the race for spices and silver mines. The expeditions became part of an Atlantic world economy linking Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Caribbean sugar plantations transformed entire islands into slave-run operations where thousands of African captives labored. The transatlantic slave trade deported millions to meet the growing demand for labor. Meanwhile, the rush for precious metals continued. Spanish galleons transported silver from Peru and Bolivia, notably from Potosi to Europe via Panama and Caribbean ports. These shipments attracted pirates and rivals, often with the complicity of officials seeking to weaken Spain. In this explosive context, the War of the League of Augsburg from 1688 to 1697, pitting Louis XIV's France against England and the Holy Roman Empire, led to an intensification of privateering. Merchant ships became prime targets. The Treaty of Ryswick in 1697 only superficially ended the tensions. The War of Spanish Succession from 1701 to 1713 reignited the conflict around Philip of Anjou, Louis XIV's grandson, who was contested for the Spanish throne. Clashes in the Mediterranean, Atlantic, and Caribbean aimed at controlling trade routes. Letters of marque authorized private captains to capture enemy ships and keep a share of the loot, forging many fortunes. From 1650 to 1710, corsairs and privateers roamed the seas, attacking merchant ships and selling their booty. Sometimes encouraged by admiralties, they also benefited from local governors, who legitimized their captures in exchange for commissions. This system, deemed illegal by the victims, became an accepted practice of maritime warfare, fueling stories of boarding actions, hidden treasures, and diplomatic disputes over the legitimacy of captures. In the 17th and early 18th centuries, the life of sailors, whether they served on merchant or warships, was harsh. Their diet consisted of hardtack made of flour and salt, often infested with insects, which had to be soaked in water, broth, or wine to be consumed. Drinks were limited to a few quarts of wine, brackish water, and sometimes weak beer. When stocks ran low, captains rationed or diluted liquids with seawater, causing tensions. Discipline was enforced by the cat-o'-nine tails, a whip with multiple strands that lacerated the backs of offenders, leaving lifelong scars. Diseases were a constant threat. Scurvy, due to the lack of fruits and vegetables, caused hemorrhages, pains, and bleeding gums, decimating crews during long voyages. Tropical fevers, particularly in West Africa and the Caribbean Sea, killed dozens of sailors, sometimes half a crew, without understanding the role of mosquitoes. Death was common. Bodies, simply wrapped in cloth, were cast into the sea with a brief prayer. The hierarchy on board was strict. The captain held absolute authority, relayed by the lieutenant or the boatswain, tasked with organizing tasks. Gunners maintained and used the artillery. Sailors, often inexperienced, quickly learned under threat of punishment. Cabin boys, adolescent or children of poor sailors, performed menial chores and slept on the deck, exposed to cold and bullying. Their lives were particularly harsh, without real protection or prospects until the next port. Despite difficult conditions, the promise of profits and the allure of the unknown prompted several thousand men to join the merchant or military navy. Although meager, wages were sometimes supplemented by shares of captures during privateering actions. Some returned with jewelry, gold coins, or exotic goods sold at a good price. In the taverns of London, Amsterdam, or Plymouth, tales of battles, mutinies, and treasure islands circulated. Songwriters and peddlers spread ballads and pamphlets about clashes between French and Dutch privateers, feeding the collective imagination. Many saw signs of luck or moral lessons in them. The taste for exploration and gain spread among a population tired of terrestrial constraints. This excitement was accompanied by a growing interest in the sciences, especially in the ports of Northern Europe. Academies such as the Royal Society in London and the Academy of Sciences in Paris sought to improve cartography, Mathematicians and astronomers attempted to measure longitude using lunar eclipses or Jupiter's moons, due to the lack of reliable chronometers. Optics progressed and improved telescopes, but ships still went astray, leading to shipwrecks and losses. Navigators then developed practical ingenuity, observing the color of the sea, the water temperature, or marine life to determine their position. The English, Dutch, and French East India Companies financed these endeavors to secure their routes. Cargoes of spices, silk, tea, or porcelain promise colossal profits, but attract pirates, privateers, and rival nations. Expeditions are protected by warships escorting merchant vessels. Flotillas of about 10 ships cross the seas in convoy. Merchants invest heavily in these escorts because the loss of a single loaded ship can ruin a campaign. In ports, ship owners, captains, insurers, bankers, workers, and sailors share the same setting, but their perspectives remain very different. On the military front, naval innovations are intensifying. Fleets are equipped with more powerful cannons, capable of firing further and more accurately. Captains adopt line-ahead tactics. They maneuver in close ranks to concentrate their firepower and break the enemy formation. These strategies require trained officers and skilled crews. Monarchs fund naval academies and reward experienced sailors to ensure their loyalty. During the 9 Years' War, the French Navy achieved successes, notably at the Battle of Beachy Head in 1690 against the Anglo-Dutch fleet. But its adversaries quickly corrected their flaws. Each confrontation, involving dozens of ships of the line, costs thousands of lives and can elevate or ruin an admiral in a few hours. Meanwhile, privateering emerges as a less costly alternative. States issue letters of marque to independent captains who hunt down isolated merchants. Privateers weaken the enemy's economy and fuel a lucrative market. Captured ships are refitted, cargoes are resold from the Caribbean to Africa. Sailors, deprived of royal protection, are tempted by the share of the booty. The status of privateer offers them a certain respectability compared to piracy, although the line remains blurred outside any supervision. During the War of the Spanish Succession, the Atlantic and Pacific become the arena of a global confrontation. England claims an increased share of the Spanish colonial heritage, while the Dutch Republic consolidates its presence in Asia. In the Caribbean, Jamaica, under English control since 1655, serves as a base to harass Spanish and French ships. Dutch merchants, sanctioned in turn, sometimes secretly deal with privateers to prevent England from dominating the sugar and tobacco trade. Each fortified island or protected port becomes a strategic stake, with alliances changing according to the circumstances. The daily life of crews remains marked by uncertainty. An enemy can appear at any moment. Lookouts scan the horizon, sailors sleep fully dressed, cannons are kept ready to fire. In the tumult of a boarding, officers shout their orders, sailors fight with cutlass and musket, while surgeons improvise treatments below decks. The victors loot provisions, rum, weapons, and money. Some prisoners are forcibly enlisted, others are sold or exchanged for ransom. The maritime conflicts of this era are not limited to the tropics. Routes to India and the South China Sea are disputed. The Portuguese, weakened by the Dutch, defend Goa and Macau. England, supported by investors from the City of London, consolidates Bombay and Madras, and sometimes attacks rival European ports. The Dutch dominate the Moluccas and the spice trade, imposing monopolies through local treaties and force, with the VOC company sending regiments and offering protection to certain princes. France tries to establish itself in India, especially in Pondicherry, but suffers from a lack of resources. The European wars deplete Louis XIV's finances, who struggles to compete with the English and Dutch fleets. Still, French engineers design new ships and privateers from Saint-Malo and Dunkirk disrupt enemy convoys. Between 1650 and 1710, a global system dominated by a few European maritime powers is established. Ports and straits become strategic stakes. Charter companies finance expeditions and armies, secure their monopolies, and intervene directly in local diplomacy. Colonial governors, endowed with military and administrative powers, often negotiate for their own profit. Colonists intensively exploit resources, increasing the need for servile labor and reinforcing the triangular trade between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Behind the maritime adventure, human dramas and lasting global transformations unfold. In this context, even a modest individual can hope to change his destiny by enlisting as a corsair or merchant sailor. But life on board is harsh. Flogging, poor food, diseases, storms, and deadly falls into the sea. Crews crammed in the holds experience discomfort and epidemics. Officers must maintain their authority in the face of the risk of mutiny. Each storm or change of wind can turn the ship into a battlefield between man and the elements. The testimonies of sailors, collected by writers or literate captains, recount life on board. The terrified cabin boy, the cry of "man overboard," the captain noting losses and damages. These writings, when they escape censorship or shipwreck, reveal a world marked by violence, fate, religion, and superstition. Prayers before each departure, invocations in the face of storms, protective names given to ships, testify to an omnipresent faith. Sailors fear bad luck or the ghosts of the drowned, while chaplains, when present, conduct services and provide moral comfort, according to practices that vary according to the flags. In this context, England asserts itself as a future maritime power. The Navigation Acts passed by Parliament restrict the use of foreign ships for trade with England and its colonies, stifling the competition. Even the Dutch republics must contend with these obstacles. British growth rests on a strong naval tradition, technical innovations, and an extensive trade network. Renovated ports welcome warehouses and specialized facilities, while London insurers, notably gathered around Lloyd's Coffee House, develop complex policies that secure expedition financing. Ship owners multiply voyages, and thousands of sailors, driven by misery or adventure, flock to the docks to embark on these risky but lucrative crossings. Between 1650 and 1710, Europe redefines its colonial ambitions, while technical and scientific progress multiplies. The theaters of operations cover the Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans. Rival powers protect their interests and sabotage those of others. Naval battles, port fires, blockades. The sea becomes a political and financial stake. Slave trade, exploitation of Andean silver mines, quest for spices and textiles fuel a global competition where military, economic, and diplomatic stakes merge. The ocean becomes a place of blending, where anonymous sailors, governors, merchants, missionaries, naturalists, and seasoned navigators cross paths. At the beginning of the 17th century, Scotland and England enter a phase of dynastic rapprochement. In 1603, James VI of Scotland becomes James IV of England, marking the union of the crowns. This union, only personal, does not suppress the separate parliaments and laws, and it is necessary to wait until 1707 with the Act of Union for a real political merger. Tensions persist, particularly on resources and maritime management. Scottish ports lag behind London or Bristol. Leith, the port of Edinburgh, struggles to compete, while Anstruther and Largo, in Fife, are mainly limited to fishing, trade with the Baltic and the Netherlands, and a few exotic products brought back by isolated ships. Scottish geography, open to the North Sea and Atlantic, offers direct access to routes still underexplored, but the violent currents, storms, and limited navigation means hinder its growth compared to England and the Dutch republics. By the mid-17th century, shipyards appear north of the Forth, supported by the experience of local fishermen, seasoned sailors against the harsh conditions of the North Sea. In Fife, shipbuilding meets various needs: sloops and flutes for fishing and coastal shipping, fast boats for the coast. Since the 14th century, lightweight and sturdy boats have been manufactured here, but the lack of capital hinders the creation of large shipyards comparable to those in England or Holland. The craftsmen, carpenters, and blacksmiths perpetuate their family know-how, hulls made of local oak, sealed with pitch from the Baltic. They sometimes provide small warships or transport pinnaces for English or continental clients. Scottish trade remains limited compared to England, but grows in the 17th century. Leith exports salted herring, smoked salmon, tanned hides, and woolens, while ships bring back Bordeaux wine, French salt, Baltic wood, and cereals. Brandy and wine are particularly successful in the towns. Ambitious merchants seek to expand their networks, but face the English maritime monopoly and its restrictive laws, encouraging smuggling, sometimes close to piracy or privateering. From the second half of the 17th century, England adopts the Navigation Acts, reserving the transport of colonial goods to English ships with predominantly English crews. The American colonies, the Caribbean, and transoceanic routes are thus off-limits to foreign ships, including Scottish ones before 1707. In theory, all direct trade with the colonies is forbidden under penalty of confiscation, but in practice, many circumvent these laws with the complicity of corrupt English officers, giving rise to a vast illegal market and the vocations of adventurer captains. In the taverns of the Lowlands, in Edinburgh or Dundee, circulate the stories of Scottish privateers facing England's enemies, notably France and Spain. The line between privateering and piracy remains thin. Without an official letter of marque, any act of war at sea becomes piracy. Falsified or missing letters open the door to abuses and the attack of any ship encountered. Two figures particularly mark the Scottish imagination. William Dampier, born around 1651, an English navigator, travels the globe, conducts multiple campaigns in the Pacific, and publishes detailed accounts of the fauna, flora, winds, and discovered lands. His successes against the Spanish embody the daring and quick wealth accessible to sailors. William Kidd, born around 1645 in Greenock or Dundee, embodies the Scottish adventurer turned pirate against his will. Hired to hunt pirates in the service of England, he falls from grace, accused of treason and personal loot. His capture and subsequent execution in 1701 resonates strongly in Scotland. For many, he remains both a bandit and a skilled navigator, a victim of political games. Dampier and Kidd offer Scottish sailors a model of maritime audacity, nurturing the idea that a determined man could become wealthy by defying the established order and attacking merchant ships. In the decades following the Union of the Crowns, Anglo-Scottish policy oscillates between cooperation and rivalry. The rulers seek to harmonize trade doctrines, but the Scottish deputies fear seeing their country relegated to a secondary position. The failure of the Darien expedition to Panama between 1698 and 1700 shows how the lack of English naval and financial support can ruin Scottish colonial ambitions. This fiasco fuels a sense of exclusion and pushes them to seek other avenues for enrichment. Privateering and smuggling then become outlets: clandestine trade, secret stopovers, resale of prohibited goods. In Leith, the docks are bustling with fishermen, porters, carters, sailors, and foreign merchants. Taverns serve as recruitment venues. Some Scottish captains promise trips to the American coasts. Patriotic and Gaelic songs celebrating bravery at sea are sung there. In the evening, oil lamps, dark beer, tobacco, and tales of famous privateers maintain the dreams of capturing Spanish galleons or Portuguese ships loaded with riches. These potential profits attract fishermen, craftsmen, and sailors. Although poorer and less populated than England, Scotland maintains a maritime tradition thanks to the taste for risk and smuggling. Its rugged coasts, islands, and locks offer numerous refuges for unloading illegal cargo. Small boats reach remote villages where the sale of forbidden goods is very profitable. The inhabitants sometimes participate out of solidarity or necessity. The royal officers, understaffed and underpaid, cannot monitor all the coves, cliffs, and fjords used by the traffickers. Along the banks of the Tay, near Dundee, networks discreetly transport French wine and Dutch brandy. Although marginal, this fraud nurtures a spirit of independence among Scottish sailors. Dissatisfied with having to rely on English goodwill for legal trade, some cross the line of legality, as exemplified by William Kidd, who was commissioned by English supporters to hunt pirates but was in turn tempted by the loot. In the lowlands, the influence of the great names of the sea is felt. William Dampier, famous for his circumnavigations, is said to have embarked Scottish sailors and shown interest in their coasts. These accounts, amplified by popular imagination, reinforce the idea of the sea as a path to wealth and glory, especially in a society where birth determines destiny. The Scots pride themselves on the robustness of their ships and the tenacity of their sailors. Most, however, remain confined to coastal fishing or short trips to England and the Dutch republics. The kingdom lacks capital and structures comparable to the great English maritime companies, like the East India Company. As a result, maritime expansion is mainly under the English banner. However, some Scottish captains, having returned enriched from campaigns in the Caribbean as auxiliaries of the English Navy, invest in the construction of brigantines designed for privateering. The lower classes are enthusiastic about following in the footsteps of daring figures. It is said that all it takes is to board at Leith or in a small port in Fife, sign with an unscrupulous captain, and one can forge an extraordinary destiny. William Kidd is said to have recruited in Queensferry near Edinburgh men ready to fight. It is also said that smuggling ships, loaded with Dutch cloth and spices, anchor at night in isolated coves where riders transport the goods inland. Privateering is not just an adventure. It expresses a desire for independence from English monopolies. In Europe, troubled by the War of the League of Augsburg from 1688 to 1697, and then by the War of the Spanish Succession from 1701 to 1713, the sea becomes a space of opportunities. The Spanish ports in America are brimming with gold, silver, and pearls. Merchant ships carry spices, silks, and porcelains. Rival powers send their privateers, and many Scottish captains wish to join in, even if it means obtaining false papers or pretending to be English agents. The authorities in London tolerate or repress according to their interests. William Dampier and William Kidd then emerge as emblematic figures. Dampier, an explorer and scholar, embodies scientific prestige and fuels the collective imagination. Kidd, of Scottish origin, symbolizes maritime success and social ascension, despite his controversial actions. The reality is harsher. The navigation conditions from Scotland are tough: hostile climate, rudimentary equipment, lack of financial means. The maps are often inaccurate, the instruments poor, diseases frequent. But the hope of capturing a Spanish ship loaded with treasures, or even a Dutch merchant, is enough to sustain dreams of rapid enrichment. Smuggling, more discreet, also contributes to this desire for emancipation. Small sloops or brigantines built in Fife depart at night for the coasts of Norway or Denmark. They load wood, pitch, tar, or local products brought back clandestinely. Some of it is resold in Scotland, the rest re-exported to North America on English or Scottish ships. Even in England, some merchants profit from this parallel trade. The lack of traceability allows captains to disguise the origin of their cargoes. Thus, several local fortunes are built on these traffics, and Fife acquires the reputation of a territory where sailors and merchants know how to take advantage of every wind, legitimate or not. As the 1707 political union approached, debates intensified. Supporters hoped that Scotland would benefit from English trade advantages and access colonies without enduring the Navigation Acts. Opponents feared that the English fleet would crush Scottish activity. Before the Act of Union, ports like Anstruther or Kirkcaldy attempted to assert their dynamism by welcoming foreign merchants and training sailors in high seas navigation. It's imagined that privateering could give Scotland an independent maritime status, but in reality, only a few captains, connected to English power or ship owners, managed to make it a career. In the taverns, enthusiasm remained. Frustrated officers, young sailors tired of herring fishing, and adventurers dreamed of emulating Kidd or Dampier. The latter was reputed to be as skilled as a Royal Navy captain and as daring as a pirate. Kidd was said to have used his connections to evade justice for a long time, becoming a model of opportunism. In Leith, recruiters promised that a letter of marque was enough to legally attack Spanish ships. Many embarked on these dubious ventures, hoping to get rich. Some disappeared, others ended up in prison, and a minority returned covered in gold, fueling the legend. At the turn of the 18th century, the Scottish economy suffered from stagnation while England prospered. Fragile agricultural revenues and insufficient legal trade pushed sailors and traders toward privateering or piracy, seen as a quick way to fortune. These enterprises, sometimes portrayed as patriotic, aimed to defend Scottish interests by striking at the Spanish and French navies. Religious identity reinforced this momentum. Protestant Scotland saw these confrontations as a fight for the good cause, even if economic motivations often prevailed. At the turn of the 18th century, Scottish ports lived to the rhythm of naval rumors. The return of privateers laden with prizes fueled the lure for adventure. In the inns of Edinburgh, tales were told of boarding actions against Dutch ships during the Anglo-Dutch Wars and the flag changes dictated by alliances. The lowlands, more populated than the highlands, provided a nursery of skilled sailors, trained from childhood on fishing boats. Skilled at mending sails, repairing a rudder, or stowing the rigging, they became valuable recruits for privateering, as well as war. This maritime Scotland was marked by constraints, but also by hopes. Before the Union of 1707, political isolation, dependence on England, and poverty pushed many sailors towards smuggling or tolerated piracy. The Navigation Acts, which favored England and limited market access, fueled resentment. Despite the controls, cargoes of tobacco, sugar, and other colonial goods circulated in the shadows, while the exploits of Dampier and Kidd nourished the legends. In the taverns of Leith and Strother or Largo, they praised the sloops capable of escaping customs ships, whispering that magistrates turned a blind eye for their share of the profit. Oral transmission kept the dreams alive. Kidd in the Red Sea, Dampier at Tortuga. Novices fed on these exploits, but the reality often limited itself to small clandestine operations. Yet, a single barrel of goods diverted from taxes could represent a treasure for a family. Thus, at the dawn of the 18th century, maritime Scotland remained trapped by English laws, but was driven by an ancient naval culture and a desire for emancipation. In the ports of Fife, maps were exchanged, expeditions prepared, weapons and equipment trafficked. All dreamed that one day, Scotland, carried by its hardened North Sea sailors, could also reign over the waves. Alexander Selkirk was born in 1676 in Lower Largo, a coastal village in Fife, Scotland, on the southern shore of the Firth of Forth. His family lived from shoemaking and tanning. His father made leather shoes for sailors and fishermen, while his mother took care of the home. As a child, he ran along the shore, watched the construction of boats, and questioned passing travelers, nurturing a desire to go to sea from a very early age. The youngest of a large family, he is tasked with modest chores like collecting skins or maintaining the workshop fire. But this experience hardens him and develops his sense of resourcefulness. In a country still marked by the Union of the Crowns of 1603, but on the fringes of the great trade routes centered on London and Bristol, Lower Largo, nevertheless, receives news of the world via sailors, cartographic discoveries, progress in measuring longitude, distant wars. Selkirk grows up convinced that the sea is a world of opportunities as much as perils. He spends long hours with the ship carpenters, observing the construction of fishing boats and listening to discussions about trade winds, whale hunts, tobacco smuggling, or skirmishes with foreign navies. Fascinated by the port and stories of treasures brought back from distant galleons, he struggles against authority that forbids him from approaching the docks. His first rebellious impulses foreshadow the independent character that will mark his future life at sea. To understand the gravity of the incident that marked Alexander Selkirk, one must grasp the importance of religion. In late 17th century Presbyterian Scotland, the church is the center of community life, prayer, conflict resolution, and discipline enforced by kirk sessions, which sanction blasphemy, drunkenness, fighting, or insolence. Every Sunday, the faithful attend psalms and sermons in austere churches. For a congregant to become violent during the service causes a scandal. In 1695, 19-year-old Alexander has a quarrel with a parishioner during the service. The sparse archives mention either a dispute over a boat repair or romantic jealousy. The quarrel escalates into a fistfight. The pastor interrupts his sermon, outraged to see his exhortations on brotherly love flouted. The congregants try to separate the youths, but a fiery Alexander continues to yell, shocking the elders. In this rigorous setting, violence in a sacred space is deemed sacrilegious. The two troublemakers are arrested, questioned in the vestry, and condemned to appear before the church elders. For Alexander, the impact is decisive. His reputation tarnished, the village convinced he will turn his back on the established order. This scandal drives him to leave Lower Largo to seek his destiny on the ocean. Pressured by those around him who see him as a troublemaker, he soon considers the sea as an escape. At the turn of the 17th and 18th centuries, Scotland remains modest in naval terms, with major expeditions being mostly English or Dutch. However, a few ship owners in Fife launch small sloops for whaling in the North Atlantic. Whale oil, baleen, and meat are in demand, despite the storms, ice floes, and Arctic isolation. Selkirk, eager for freedom, enlists Young as a cabin boy. On board, he discovers the harshness of maritime life. Icy decks, perpetually damp clothes, rations of hardtack, salted fish, and scarce water. This first school of the sea teaches him a brutal discipline. No one jokes with the captain's or harpooner's orders under threat of the whip. Yet, Alexander finds a form of gratification by sprinkling salt on the deck to prevent slips or hoisting the sail in gales. He feels indispensable, at the forefront of a humanity brave enough to face the unknown. When the crew harpoons a whale, the tension is immense. The boats maneuver alongside the raging ocean, and the risk of capsizing is constant. Selkirk witnesses these scenes with terror and fascination. He understands that survival demands vigilance, teamwork, and physical endurance. He learns to observe the winds, spot currents, and predict fish behavior before the storm. His superiors quickly notice he has no fear of climbing the mast to scan the horizon and handles the compass and lead line, rare whaling instruments, with skill. Gradually, he earns the trust of officers less inclined to reprimand him as long as he respects the essential rules. He perceives, however, the limitations of the profession: meager pay, monotony, uncertain future. His independent nature and the memory of his confrontation in the church lead him to consider another path, sea racing, labeled piracy, depending on one's perspective. At the end of the 17th century, the conflicts between England, France, and Spain, along with the ambitions of the United Provinces, favored the rise of privateers. Armed with letters of marque, they legally attacked enemy ships to seize their merchandise. Scotland also participated in this network, and in the taverns of the lowlands, stories circulated about the exploits of William Dampier, navigator and writer, and William Kidd, a Scottish captain accused of piracy. These tales fired the imagination of young sailors like Selkirk, convinced that the sea held fortunes to be seized. During his first engagement on a privateer ship, he encountered the close quarters, rationing, and sleepless nights already familiar from whaling ships. But the atmosphere was different. Each capture promised a bounty of spices, precious fabrics, gold, or silver. Selkirk became passionate about strategic discussions, avoiding Spanish patrols, disguising under a neutral flag, swooping down on prey. The privateer captains, charismatic, alternated between brutal authority and paternalism. This ambiguity attracted Alexander. Here, one could quickly rise through the ranks if willing to take risks. In 1698, he joined an expedition led by a captain nicknamed Picaroon. This word describes a crafty pirate, quick to change flags to escape pursuit. Documents related to this campaign remain fragmentary because these ships, close to piracy, cultivated secrecy. Picaroon seems to have sailed in the Caribbean and along the Central American coasts, selling his loot in secluded bays before heading further north. Selkirk, without being an officer, held an intermediate position. Literate and skilled in navigation, he kept records of the logbook and monitored the sounding line as well as the helm direction. Initially, the crew harbored high hopes, capturing galleons loaded with sugar, tobacco, or silver. But the captures were slow to come, provisions were lacking, and rumors spread that Captain Picaroon was hiding reserves. Frustration grew, fueling the idea of rebellion. Selkirk, known for his frankness, criticized the captain's strategy as dangerous against the Spanish. The mutiny broke out after a failed skirmish against the Spanish sloop. Hungry, the sailors wanted more audacity, while Picaroon hesitated. Wounded, he retreated with his supporters. Selkirk took the helm to avoid drifting and deceived the Spaniards by simulating a retreat. The crew was saved, and Picaroon, weakened, had to promise an equitable distribution of provisions and spoils. Though discreet in sources, this mutiny revealed the harsh reality of privateering: internal rivalries, mistrust, and constant threats. Picaroon contemplated revenge, but the capture of a Spanish brigantine loaded with cocoa and tobacco calmed tensions. Selkirk then established himself as a reliable navigator, guiding the ship through reefs and shoals. However, mistrust persisted. Fearing reprisals, Selkirk seized the opportunity to discreetly leave the ship during a probable stopover in Central America or the Caribbean, where privateers and merchants mingled. Taking advantage of the disorganization, he detached from the crew and pursued his own path. Selkirk was later found in a few taverns in Scotland or Ireland, half-heartedly recounting his adventures. He returned tougher, with a tanned complexion, a beard streaked with lighter hairs, and sometimes marked by scars. It was whispered that he had experienced a mutiny. Some said he led it, others that he endured it, but all recognized his keen sense of navigation and his courage. This reputation attracted privateer captains and shady merchants. Scotland remained poor, and Selkirk saw these maritime offers as a chance to escape poverty. His temperament remained unpredictable, jovial and generous at a tavern table, violent if provoked or if his honor was called into question. His stubborn refusal of orders deemed suicidal was also noted. For instance, he reportedly contested the decision to set sail at night with no visibility on the rocky coasts of Fife, reputedly dangerous. This refusal was perceived as insubordination, but his survival instinct, forged by the privateer life, dictated protecting his skin before seeking any glory, an attitude that earned him as many enemies as admirers. On the eve of the War of the Spanish Succession, from 1701 to 1713, opportunities multiply for a sailor like him. English privateers and agents of the East India Company are recruiting. Proposed missions include reaching the Pacific to attack the Spanish, crossing Cape Horn to hunt galleons, or protecting merchant convoys. With his experience on whalers and with Picaroon, Selkirk presents himself as a competent navigator, capable of plotting a course, holding a helmsman steady in a storm, and managing limited resources using the era's instruments: compass, astrolabe, and uncertain time measurement. Rumors claim he has rare vigor. He supposedly resisted tropical fevers that felled other sailors. His robustness, seamanship, and defiance of authority attract adventurous captains. His notoriety even surpasses Scottish taverns. In England, some officers seek to enlist him. However, Selkirk does not accept just any mission. He favors those promising exploits, straddling legality and piracy. His misadventure with Picaroon convinced him that risk and rich prizes are the quickest path to financial independence. Some parishioners from Lower Largo describe Alexander as the village's enfant terrible, recalling the 1695 brawl in the church, regretting he never learned to temper his anger. Others commend his courage and ability to sustain himself in the worst hardships, noting he never feared hard work, being the son of a shoemaker and tanner. No one yet imagines he is about to embark on maritime adventures surpassing anything a Fife fisherman could dream of. His name will soon appear in travel tales, alongside renowned captains, making British privateering a weapon against the Iberian empires. Thus, young Selkirk, a natural-born mutineer and confirmed navigator, steps toward bolder expeditions, where he will have to fight for his survival as much as for his share of glory. In 1703, as Europe is shaken by the War of the Spanish Succession, a private expedition organizes in Atlantic ports to attack the Spanish possessions of the New World. William Dampier, already known for his circumnavigations and travel accounts, takes command of a squadron destined for the Pacific to capture Spanish ships and trading posts. He must share his authority with Thomas Stradling, captain of the galley Cinque Ports, which quickly leads to tensions. Among the recruits is Alexander Selkirk, a spirited Scotsman, who embarked at Kinsale, Ireland at the end of 1703. This southern Irish port serves as a hub for many British and Scottish ships. Selkirk, already reputed as a competent sailor thanks to experiences on whalers and privateer ships, is engaged by Dampier. He is entrusted with the role of crewmaster on the Cinque Ports, supervising maneuvers, coordinating sailors, and overseeing the condition of sails, spars, and rigging, an essential role for a privateer ship. The expedition is part of the War of the Spanish Succession from 1701 to 1713 and aims to exploit Spanish vulnerability in the Pacific. Between the Gulf of California and Peru, colonies rely on galleons loaded with precious metals and provisions. To reach them, one must cross the Atlantic, pass Cape Horn, and sail up the Chilean and Peruvian coasts, a perilous route demanding discipline and hierarchy to withstand storms, diseases, and internal tensions. Dampier, as the squadron leader, organizes the convoy, refueling points, distribution of provisions, choice of stopovers, and coordination among captains. But Thomas Stradling, captain of the Cinque Ports, jealously defends his authority on board. He accepts Dampier's strategic directions, but refuses any interference in the day-to-day management of his ship. This dual hierarchy, typical of privateering expeditions, generates constant conflicts. Stradling sometimes prioritizes an isolated target, while Dampier seeks a collective strategy. Personality tensions, heightened by sea conditions, will increase. Initially, during the Atlantic crossing, relations remain cordial. The ship follows the African coast, then sets course for South America, taking advantage of winds and currents. Due to lack of precise charts and no solution to the longitude problem, navigation discrepancies reach dozens of miles. Provisions are rationed, biscuit, fresh water, salted meat, beer, and rum to maintain morale. But alcohol abuse quickly leads to disputes. The first tensions erupt when the Cinque Port suffers damage. Fragile sails, worn hull, defective waterproofing. Dampier accuses Stradling of neglecting the ship's preparation. Stradling replies that he lacks resources and good carpenters. In tropical waters, marine worms exacerbate leaks. Each leak demands urgent repairs, adding to the crew's burden. Selkirk, the ship's master, serves as a mediator but struggles to maintain discipline. Gradually, the food supply deteriorates. Biscuits become infested, salted meats turn rancid, barrels of flour transform into vile mush. Alcohol becomes the only escape, but also a source of brawls. False alerts of enemy ships create even more chaos. Drunken men, collective starts, cannons armed for nothing. In this atmosphere of suspicion and fatigue, the officers under Stradling, but dependent on Dampier's orders, increasingly contest. Everyone wants to profit from the voyage, but no one wants to risk their life on a ship already in poor condition. Upon rounding Cape Horn, dreaded for its storms, the Cinque Ports faces violent winds, waves flooding the deck, and constant cold. Without proper equipment, the sailors continuously bail water, while the officers fear shipwreck. Stradling often reduces sail out of fear of dismasting. Selkirk approves, but notes the crew's gloomy morale. Each lull reveals new damages that must be urgently repaired. The squadron finally reaches the Pacific, but the Chilean coast remains dangerous. Dampier then orders a course to the Juan Fernandez archipelago, discovered in the 16th century by the Spaniard Juan Fernandez, a refuge for English and Dutch privateers. The islands offer fresh water, fish, and goats introduced by the Spanish, useful against scurvy. Ships can also be beached for repairs. The Cinque Ports, heavily damaged, requires an overhaul, and several sick sailors demand a respite. Upon arrival, the crew sets up a supply camp. Selkirk explores the island. Springs, caves, and goats are indeed present, but the climate remains unstable. Sails are dried, boats repaired, and the hull caulked. Soon, a debate arises. Should they undertake major repairs or set sail immediately to attack Spanish galleons? Stradling hesitates between caution and impatience, while Dampier urges them to return to sea to not compromise the campaign. Selkirk, a direct witness to the leaks and worm-eaten hulls, warns, at the first storm, the Cinque Ports may sink. Amidst this climate of distrust, Selkirk sees his warnings ignored by Stradling. He is accused of exaggerating, sowing discord, or wanting to usurp command. Yet, several sailors share his concern about the ship's condition and consider leaving the crew. Tensions flare on the beach, where powder and meat are dried amidst threats, insults, and excesses of rum. Dampier criticizes Stradling's inaction and suggests entrusting the mission to another captain if the Cinque Ports cannot withstand the journey. Stradling becomes enraged, while Selkirk refuses to board a ship he deems doomed. In a mix of anger and clarity, he declares he would rather stay on the island than perish at sea. He invokes his maritime rights over an unfit ship, an extreme gesture in the isolated Juan Fernandez archipelago. The prospect of being abandoned on a distant island is frightening, but Selkirk asserts that it's better to survive here than sink at sea. Stradling, furious, sees it as mutiny, but seizes the opportunity to sideline a dissenter. The crew is divided between those who think Selkirk is mad and those who praise his caution. Conflict erupts in September 1704. As the privateer mission prepares to head north, Stradling confronts Selkirk before the crew. Despite injunctions, Selkirk repeats his decision. He will not board. The scene is violent and tense, but Stradling finally yields and leaves him ashore, convinced he will soon regret it. Selkirk takes a few belongings: a musket, gunpowder, a knife, a hatchet, clothes, and his Bible. When the Cinque Ports abandons him, Selkirk remains alone on the beach, determined and wary. Some sailors predict his imminent death, while others think his fate is better than risking shipwreck. No one yet imagines the extent of his isolation or the possibility of his return. Stradling's discipline closes the incident. The crew, eager for spoils, prefers to continue its route towards the Spanish ports. The ship disappears into the ocean, no longer concerned with Selkirk's fate. In September 1704, Alexander Selkirk was abandoned on the island of Masa Tierra in the Juan Fernandez archipelago off the coast of Chile, more than 600 kilometers from the mainland. These islands, known in Europe only thanks to navigators who had rounded Cape Horn, appeared vaguely on maps, with no precise information on anchorages. Selkirk, however, knew that a cove offered a safe haven. Relieved to find solid ground, he becomes aware of his isolation. Only a few goats that have gone wild remain, as well as rats and cats left by previous sailors. The island, made of steep cliffs, dense forests, and steep slopes, presents a daily challenge. The climate, subtropical but unstable, alternates between scorching heat, cold winds, and sudden rains, often accompanied by mist. The vegetation combines conifers, ferns, and rocky areas devoid of trees, while the valleys shelter the wild goats, a vital resource for Selkirk. After his disembarkation from the Cinque Ports, he makes an inventory of his belongings: a musket with limited powder and ammunition, an axe, a knife, a hammock, some tobacco, a Bible, and a few navigation instruments: compass, divider, quadrant. Aware of the scarcity of his resources, he knows he must conserve them carefully. The Bible becomes for him a spiritual support in the silence of the island. In the first few days, he locates fresh water from streams and the areas suitable for shelter. The goats, which he hunts or captures with rudimentary traps, provide him with meat and skins. With patience, he manages to tame a milk goat, whose milk improves his survival and provides him with a semblance of company. He also learns to distinguish edible plants from those that cause ailments, developing an increasingly effective survival strategy. Wishing to ensure a food surplus, Selkirk sets up a rudimentary vegetable garden. In a sunny plot, he plants seeds of turnips and cabbages brought or recovered on board. The unstable climate and stony soil make growth difficult, but he persists, reworking the soil with his knife and watering it with a stream. His harvests remain modest, some turnips and cabbage sprouts, but combined with goat meat, they provide a vital nutritional balance. From his arrival, the question of housing is crucial. Sleeping outside is impossible due to the humidity and wind. Selkirk fells trees with his axe, cuts stakes, and builds a first hut near the beach to monitor the horizon. He strengthens the framework with branches, fills in the gaps with mud, and erects a roof of foliage. The task, demanding, takes him several days. Fearing tides and storms, he builds a second hut on a sheltered plateau, intended to store food and protect from the weather. With his experience, he builds it more solidly and better insulated, installing a table, a space for his musket, and a hammock protected from humidity and insects. In 1705, an earthquake followed by sea movements, perhaps a minor tsunami or strong waves, disrupts his routine. Selkirk watches the sea recede before coming back to hit the beach. Understanding the danger, he abandons his coastal hut and makes the plateau refuge his main living area. Isolation has a direct impact on Selkirk's physical health. He recovers from the scurvy contracted aboard the Cinque Ports, thanks to goat meat and the island's vegetation. Hunting and walking strengthen his muscles, while his joint pains due to the humidity at sea disappear. He must, however, face mosquitoes, ticks, and injuries, which he treats with alcohol or herbal decoctions. To move around, he makes shoes from goat skin with roughly tanned soles, cut with a knife and stitched with thongs. His worn-out clothes are supplemented with leather to protect against cold and humidity, with appearance counting little against necessity. On the mental plane, he maintains a routine, rising at dawn to scan the sea, a frugal meal of vegetables, dried meat, or goat milk, rounds of his traps and crops. He sings psalms learned in his Scottish village of Lower Largo, reads and meditates on the Bible, his only reading, which he recites aloud to stimulate his mind. He also observes nature, seabirds, clouds, and landscapes. He tames a wild cat, useful for hunting rats and keeping him company, partially filling the absence of human presence. He sometimes talks to it or to other animals. His keen sense of observation leads him to identify birds, crustaceans, fish, and attempt fishing with a makeshift metal hook, often unsuccessfully. His sustenance mainly relies on goat hunting and gathering edible fruits and roots. An episode highlights Selkirk's precariousness on Masa Tierra. Out hunting a goat in a sloped area, he chases the animal near a ravine. The ground, weakened by rain, gives way under his feet. He falls heavily and injures his leg and shoulder. The goat he was pursuing also slips and ends up injured. His musket is out of reach. Only his knife remains useful. Unable to get out on his own, he spends the night on a ledge, painful and vulnerable, occasionally hearing the bleating of the animal. At dawn, he uses roots to pull himself up to a safer area, then descends back to the goat. It is suffering from a broken leg. He restrains it with makeshift cords and applies a rudimentary bandage of leaves and fibers. With an improvised crutch, he laboriously transports the animal to a plateau. Exhausted, he spends the day by its side, unable to return to his cabin. Later, he will describe this moment as a strange intimacy. Two wounded beings, forced to share a precarious convalescence in an isolated corner of the island. Selkirk spends the next day at the edge of the ravine, regaining his strength. He drinks a little water from a trickle, eats some dried meat, and watches over the goat, too injured to move. Instead of killing it, he feels a strange sense of solidarity. Solitude and fear seem to bind the man and the animal in this ordeal. The next day, he summons his last strength to leave the area. He ties up the goat, tries to lift it, and trudges painfully on the steep terrain. After hours of effort, he reaches his usual path and sets up a temporary camp as his leg remains painful. The goat, weakened but alive, becomes a comforting presence for him. During this forced pause, he tries to feed and calm it. For the first time since arriving on the island, he has a companion. It It takes him an entire day before considering returning to his cabin. Then remains a choice, to finish off the goat or attempt to save it. Some accounts claim he left it to come back later, others that he brought it back and cared for it as a pet. In any case, this episode illustrates human fragility and the survival instinct in the face of the wild nature. Alone on the island of Massa Tierra, Selkirk continues his existence between the anxiety of an anonymous death and the hope of one day spotting a sail. Each misstep reminds him of the precariousness of his survival, threatened by weather, injuries, and loneliness. Selkirk is rescued in February 1709 during a privateering expedition led by Woodes Rogers, a British navigator. Financed by merchants from Bristol, the expedition takes place during the War of the Spanish Succession, 1701, 1713. Two ships, the Duke and the Duchess, round Cape Horn, a route feared for its storms and violent winds. The aim is to seize Spanish cargoes on the Pacific coast of South America, from Chile to Mexico: silver, gold, cocoa, and spices. Rogers surrounds himself with experienced sailors, including William Dampier, a famous explorer despite his controversial reputation. In 1708, the two ships set sail from Bristol, with a scheduled stopover at Cape Verde, then passing through the Strait of Magellan or Cape Horn. The southern climate and delays force Rogers to adapt his route. The passage around Cape Horn, amid violent storms, exhausts the sailors. Once in the Pacific, the Duke and the Duchess sail along the coastlines of Chile and Peru, capturing Spanish ships, often lightly armed. Each capture brings money and prestige, enhancing the reputation of Rogers and his investors. At the beginning of 1709, the crews suffer from a lack of provisions and scurvy. They then head toward the Juan Fernandez Archipelago, off the coast of Chile, known for its wild goats, abundant water, and sheltered bays. Upon their arrival, they discover a mountainous and wooded landscape sparsely inhabited. As they anchor, smoke signals rise from the beach, revealing the presence of a man. Rogers and Dampier promptly send a boat to investigate. An officer from the Duchess lands with his men and discovers a silhouette in ragged skins, with a long beard and a complexion marked by the elements. Despite his appearance, it is the man's joy that strikes. After more than 4 years of isolation, Alexander Selkirk finally sees fellow Englishmen arriving. His hoarse cries with a Scottish accent resound, stunning the sailors. Taken aboard the Duke, Selkirk is presented to Woodes Rogers. Moved and awkward with his words, he tells his story. In 1703, he had embarked on the St. George and the Cinque Ports under William Dampier and Thomas Stradling. Distrusting the condition of the Cinque Ports, he chose to stay on the island during a stopover, but no one came back for him. The story intrigues Rogers and his officers. Dampier, present on the Duke, recognizes Selkirk and confirms past tensions with Stradling. All marvel at his solitary survival, proof of exceptional physical and mental endurance. Rogers sees in him a providential asset. Selkirk knows the tides, winds, and anchorages of the Pacific, precious knowledge for privateers. Rogers orders that he be given clothes, that his beard be trimmed, and his wounds treated. Carefully fed, Selkirk attracts the curiosity of the crew, who question him about his survival techniques. He describes his huts, his trained animals, his hunts, and his moral trials, all while showing a face determined to return to the sea. During the stopover, Selkirk guides Rogers on the island of Massa Tierra. He points out the water sources, the goat hunting areas, and proves his skill with the musket, often hitting his target with one shot. Still agile, he climbs the rocks to flush out game. Rogers sees in him a valuable ally. Rogers and Dampier decide to test his maritime skills. A former sailmaster, Selkirk agrees to participate in the capture of a Spanish galleon reported shortly before their arrival at Juan Fernandez, the Nuestra Señora del Santo Niño, reputed to be laden with riches. He says he is ready to prove that he has lost none of his courage or sailing skills. When the Duke and the Duchess set sail to intercept a Spanish ship, Selkirk coordinates the navigation under the supervision of Rogers. He observes the sail trims, advises on the currents, and adapts the course to changing winds. The overcast sky complicates the task. After long hours, the lookouts finally signal a sail. Rogers orders the British flag to be hoisted, and preparations made for the cannons and muskets. Selkirk, focused and determined, impresses the crew with his calm. The Duke and the Duchess close in on the galleon. The Spanish captain, at a disadvantage, attempts to scuttle the cargo, but Selkirk coordinates the boarding with precision. The holds yield silver and provisions. The Nuestra Señora del Santo Niño, known as the sacrificed galleon, falls into British hands. Rogers rewards Selkirk with a share of the loot and confirms him as the second navigator. In February 1709, after his rescue, Selkirk gradually resumed a seafaring life within Woodes Rogers' squadron, comprised of the Duke and the Duchess. The crew discovered him marked by solitude. He spoke aloud, scanned the horizon, climbed into the rigging with agility. His navigation skills, instinct for the winds, and ability to motivate the men quickly earned him general trust. Considered a tactical asset, he aroused curiosity and respect after more than 4 years on the island of Massa Tierra. Yet, in maneuvering and in combat, he proved fearsomely effective. William Dampier, who knew his past, confirmed his qualities as a seasoned explorer. Keen to exploit every opportunity against the Spaniards, Rogers established him as the second navigator, responsible for coastal reconnaissance and routes in the South Pacific. This privateering expedition, launched in 1709 by merchants from Bristol, aimed to weaken the Spanish Empire by capturing its merchant ships and to accumulate a treasure shared between investors and the crew. The squadron relied on William Dampier, an experienced navigator who had already circumnavigated the globe, to advise Woodes Rogers in selecting targets. The goal was to harass Spanish traffic from Peru to the Gulf of California. Selkirk played a decisive role as a pilot, guiding the attacks and ensuring coastal navigation. His past solitary survival was seen by the crew as a favorable omen. After some captures in Chile, the squadron halted in the Galapagos, known for their giant tortoises and freshwater reserves. Ships were repaired, supplies were gathered, and future attacks were planned. Rumors spoke of a rich galleon loaded with gold, silver, and cocoa off the coast of Quito. Rogers, advised by Dampier and Selkirk, decided to leave the archipelago in early June 1709 for the Gulf of Panama, a crucial passage between Lima and Central America. On the way north, the squadron engaged small Spanish vessels, which were often forced to flee. Selkirk excelled at spotting channels and coves for ambushes, while the crew trained for combat. His reputation grew, His survival stories on Maza Tierra impressed the sailors and reminded them of the Pacific's dangers. The officers, including Thomas Dover, admired his psychological resilience, proof that an isolated man was not doomed to madness, which reinforced discipline by reminding them that abandonment was part of the Corsairs' rules. In July and August 1709, the expedition reached the Mexican coast to intercept a galleon coming from Asia. Since the Spanish conquest, trans-Pacific trade had connected Manila to the ports of New Spain, with galleons carrying spices, silks, and porcelain. The English corsairs watched for this bounty, but the heat, thirst, and disease threatened the crew. Wood as Rogers banked on a capture to restore hope. In September 1709, a Spanish ship, the Nuestra Señora de la Encarnación, was spotted. Rogers and his men gave chase. The pursuit lasted several days. The Duke and the Duchess, more maneuverable, managed to block the galleon's course. After a few well-placed shots, the Encarnación surrendered. Selkirk, at the helm, skillfully guided the maneuvers. The capture contained silks, cocoa, silver, and gold, a modest but valuable success. The Spanish crew was interrogated, and Selkirk received a proportional share of the loot, his role as navigator being recognized. On board, the victory was celebrated with restraint. The Encarnación was either requisitioned or disarmed according to the sources. Then the squadron continued its journey along Central America before venturing into the Pacific. The boldness of Rogers, Dampier, and Selkirk kept morale high despite the risks of scurvy and disease. The expedition sailed to the Polynesian archipelagos, then headed towards Southeast Asia, preferring to avoid Cape Horn and seek new prizes in the Asian seas before returning to Europe via the Indian Ocean. The weeks of navigation stretched, maps remained imprecise, and longitude was calculated by estimation, lacking a chronometer. Dampier, familiar with these seas, guided the squadron with the help of Selkirk and Rogers, who charted routes with chalk, anticipating the monsoon winds. After several months, the fleet anchored in 1710 in the port of Batavia, now Jakarta in Indonesia, then controlled by the Dutch East India Company. The English were received with caution. The United Provinces maintained ambiguous relations with England, but port rights and costly repairs facilitated a compromise. The stopover allowed the holds to be replenished with rice, spices, salted meats, and fresh water, while the shipyards repaired the hulls. The exhausted crew enjoyed a respite. Selkirk drew the attention of the Batavians by recounting his survival on Juan Fernandez Island, complete with goats and vegetables, fueling curiosity more than credulity. From Batavia, the squadron resumed its route towards Europe by crossing the Indian Ocean and heading towards the Cape. The monsoon, cyclones, and enemy ships always threatened, but the route was frequented by the Dutch and English fleets. Selkirk made numerous star observations and insisted on the vital importance of fresh water and varied diet, considering shortages more formidable than cannons. The capture of the Encarnación was carefully protected, cementing the crew's cohesion. The officers, between plans for future expeditions or retirement on their lands, discussed their future. Selkirk, attached to the sea but nostalgic for Scotland, shared his reflections with Rogers and Dampier. The passage around the Cape of Good Hope, devoid of major incident aside from some winter storms, took place around the middle of the year 1711. The stopover, facilitated by the peace restored between the English and the Dutch after the War of the Spanish Succession, allowed for final repairs before crossing the Atlantic. The precious loot, destined to be sold in London, fueled the mariners' zeal despite some quarrels over shares. The approach to England, in relative peace thanks to ongoing treaty negotiations, triggered general excitement. Selkirk, aware of his unique destiny, exchanged anecdotes and travel notes with Rogers and Dampier. They were all already thinking of publishing their accounts, knowing that the English public loved maritime exploits and that London booksellers would pay well for original testimonies. The fleet arrived in the Thames in October 1711. The return of two privateer ships loaded with loot attracted the attention of the English maritime circles. The merchants of Bristol, who had financed the expedition, calculated their shares and distributed them. The sharing caused some tensions, but the abundance of valuable goods satisfied the majority of the shareholders. Selkirk received a substantial sum, probably the highest of his life. Rumor of this Scotsman found in the Pacific spread through the taverns of London. A hero of survival and companion in the privateer Victory, he fascinated a public eager for extraordinary stories. His name, sometimes distorted as Selkrig or Selcraig, fed curiosity. The mariners of the Duke spoke of his impressive beard, his goatskin clothes, and his restored physical strength aboard. In 1712, Woodes Rogers published A Cruising Voyage Round the World, a detailed account of the expedition dedicating several pages to Selkirk's discovery on the Juan Fernandez Island. Rogers described him as a bearded, agile man, dressed in skins and speaking poorly after his isolation. The work enjoyed wide success in England and abroad. The public, increasingly interested in maritime voyages, was enthused by the story of survival in the wild. The London press seized on the subject. Gazettes and news sheets published interviews, rumors, and exaggerations. Some newspapers claimed he had single-handedly fought off a pack of wild beasts. Others, that he had tamed several goats. The reality, more modest, was still extraordinary. He had survived 4 years and 4 months, cut off from the world, thanks to his resourcefulness and determination. Later invited to scholarly circles, including the Royal Society, Selkirk caught the attention of theologians, astronomers, naturalists, and mathematicians. In an England experiencing a maritime boom, his experience raised numerous questions. How could the human body withstand such isolation? What observations had he made about the local fauna and flora? Could he have developed empirical methods for maritime navigation without reliable instruments? Expectations were disappointed. Selkirk had discovered no new navigation techniques. His notes were limited to imprecise star observations, lacking a calendar. But his adventure nourished a broader inquiry into the capacity of a single man to survive in total isolation. The sessions took place in halls where scholars and the curious mingled. The elegant attire contrasted with the rustic costume of Selkirk, described as a man shaped by the sea air. He was questioned about food, shelters, possible treatments in isolation, but also about his faith and the use of the Bible to break solitude. His account, often intimate, fueled scholars' hypotheses on human resilience. While sketch artists drew his face, the Royal Society sought to verify his memories, topography of the island, behaviors of the fauna, natural phenomena. Even if basic, his answers marked an unprecedented meeting between a shipwrecked sailor and the scholarly community at a time when surviving so long in isolation still bordered on legend. Maps of the Pacific were also spread out for him to trace his former navigations and locate the Juan Fernandez archipelago. The English saw this as an opportunity to improve their knowledge: water sources, currents to avoid, commercial stopovers. Woodes Rogers, the leader of the privateering expedition, would occasionally correct certain details, while William Dampier, already recognized by the Royal Society, brought his scientific authority. Bringing together Dampier, Rogers, and Selkirk in the same room provided a rare spectacle. Privateering adventure met science. All agreed on the importance of nautical charts and coast surveys to strengthen English naval supremacy. Selkirk, not much of an orator, responded briefly, but his testimony captivated. He embodied resilience, the possibility of error without instruments, and man's confrontation with the unknown. This curiosity sparked an abundance of publications, often embellished, invented stone temple, exaggerated anecdotes, confusions with other castaways. This flood of writings embedded Selkirk in the popular imagination. The man, although discreet, sometimes fled the crowd, tired of the gazes and questions, although he willingly acceded to the requests of patrons. He knew that this fame could open up a more stable future, perhaps within the Royal Navy. For now, Selkirk's relations with the Royal Society were limited to a few occasional encounters. Scholars sought to assess his abilities. Had he recorded his observations? Did he retain tide charts? Could he locate his hermitage? Not very literate, Selkirk explained that he had rarely had paper and ink, and had mostly devoted his energy to hunting, subsistence farming, and shelter building. The tale of his solitude fascinated more than his records. Did he pray? Did he name the animals? Had he tried to escape? He admitted having thought of leaving the island on a small craft, but the swells, the lack of provisions, and the uncertainty of navigation discouraged him. He also described the shock he experienced upon hearing human voices again, and the bustle of a privateering ship, which moved the audience. The scholars concluded that the human mind, when faced with isolation, could develop remarkable adaptation skills. Discussions then expanded to the existence of unknown archipelagos, Pacific wildlife, or the possibility of establishing sustainable colonies on isolated islands. In 1712, during the reprints of Rogers' work, the press continued to exploit Selkirk's story. Newspapers caricatured him as a ragged castaway or a proud privateer under the English flag. Rumors spoke of a visit to St. James's Palace without certainty. His name, however, became ingrained in English colonial memory as that of a sailor who returned triumphant despite being abandoned. Paradoxically, Selkirk felt out of place. Used to simple living, he was intimidated by London's exuberance. He indulged in taverns, shows, and aristocratic curiosities, but remained attached to the harshness learned on his island. The Royal Society also exchanged letters with French, Dutch, and Italian scholars to disseminate this case of survival in isolation. The debates oscillated between naturalism and philosophy, the ingenuity and spiritual strength of man, or fragility in the face of the elements. These reflections fed into religious, scientific, and moral theories, foreshadowing future literary inspirations. Rogers had already featured Selkirk in his work. Daniel Defoe and others drew ideas for narratives about castaways. By the end of 1712, Selkirk had become a well-known figure, his story circulating in salons, bookstores, and merchant circles. The mapping work of the Pacific also benefited from his testimony. Navigators and cartographers utilized his descriptions: approximate location of the Juan Fernandez Island, natural caves, distance to the Chilean coast. This data could help prevent shipwrecks. Travel collections by Dampier or Edward Cook further fueled the interest of adventurers. The Royal Navy, for its part, saw the strategic advantage. Fertile islands allowed fleets to stay at sea for a long time without relying on an enemy port. If Selkirk had survived alone, entire crews could resupply there during future campaigns. The immediate interest was to exploit the curiosity of the moment. The presence of Selkirk in England, a few months after the arrival of the privateer Lute, summarized the spirit of the time: adventure, scientific curiosity, religious faith, and commercial appetite. The merchants of Bristol rejoiced. The expedition had brought in large profits and encouraged financing other voyages. Pamphlets extolled British bravery and the fate that loomed over the Spanish Empire, even on its secret maritime routes. The Scot, a privateer and Pacific miracle, became a symbol to encourage new missions. Selkirk, proud but reserved, responded with moderation, occasionally met with journalists, but avoided the crowd. London and Bristol rang with heroic stories, and his already gave him the status of national hero. Daniel Defoe, born around 1660, the exact date remains debated, and died in 1731, established himself as a prolific author and keen observer of England's maritime affairs in the early 18th century. Before dedicating himself to novels, he gained a reputation as a pamphleteer, publishing satires and political analyses, marked by his support for William III of Orange and his Protestant positions. His unstable merchant career led him to prison for debt. In this context, as English society grew passionate about sea exploits and riches from the colonies, Defoe took an interest in the accounts of navigators like Woodes Rogers, William Dampier, and Edward Cook. London, a center of commerce and ideas, buzzed in its cafes with extraordinary stories about geography and the distant world. In 1712, Woodes Rogers, an English privateer financed by Bristol, published a cruising voyage round the world, an account of his world tour. He notably described the discovery, in February 1709, of Alexander Selkirk, a Scotsman living alone for over 4 years on the Chilean archipelago of Juan Fernandez. Dampier, an explorer and cartographer, occasionally accompanied Rogers, while Edward Cook, a young captain of the same expedition, also wrote a report. The English public thus discovered, fascinated, the image of a man surviving isolated on an island amidst solitude, illnesses, tropical fauna, and scarce resources. These accounts, mixed with Dampier's anecdotes, offered a first canvas both real and novelistic, which caught Defoe's attention. He also drew from lesser-known sources. Henry Pitman, a surgeon condemned in 1685 and sent to Barbados, recounted his escape to the island of Tortuga and his survival experiences. Robert Knox, captive in Ceylon from 1659 to 1679, described in his account 19 years of cultural isolation and his escape, providing precious details about the local society and languages. Other testimonies from Protestant missionaries circulated through confessional print shops. These captivity and survival stories fascinated London's literary circles. From 1712, as he turned away from politics to focus more on fiction, Defoe accumulated these materials. England saw the emergence of a novelistic literature, but the transposition of maritime events into fiction remained rare. However, the public sought a moral and religious dimension. Distant islands became a metaphor for trials where man confronted God. A convinced Protestant, Defoe perceived in the case of Selkirk, as in the accounts of Pitman and Knox, an opportunity to write an exemplary story about providence, redemption, and salvation. By 1718, a rumor already circulated in editorial circles that Defoe was preparing a book destined for success. Booksellers in Fleet Street and Paternoster Row took interest, seduced by the idea of an exotic and edifying adventure. London then had numerous places of intellectual sociability, cafes, clubs, reading circles, where sailors, journalists, and printers exchanged ideas. Defoe knew what attracted attention, a true story turned novel, marked by survival against nature and the threat of pirates. He drew inspiration from the accounts of Woodes Rogers and Edward Cook about the survival of Alexander Selkirk, but added elements borrowed from other castaways. He documented the passage of Cape Horn, the trade winds, the fauna of tropical islands, and missionary accounts describing solitude and mystical fervor. On April 25, 1719, The Life and Strange Surprising Adventures of Robinson Crusoe of York, Mariner, was anonymously published in London. The first-person narration intrigued, and very quickly the author was identified as Daniel Defoe. The success was immediate. Some readers believed it to be a real account. Others highlighted its religious dimension, seeing in Crusoe a man who prays and repents in adversity. Critics point out the discrepancy with the story of Selkirk, who returned in 1711 after 4 years and 4 months of isolation, while Crusoe stays 28 years on his island. This choice allows Defoe to develop a broader picture of the struggle against solitude and to emphasize theology, reflection on sins, providence, and redemption. For a Protestant England marked by religious disputes and the fear of damnation, the message is powerful. The appearance of Friday, absent from Selkirk's account since the island of Massa Tierra was inhabited only by wild goats, constitutes a major innovation. Defoe introduces a native to embody the other and symbolize the encounter between two worlds. Crusoe becomes an educator, converter, and sovereign of his island. This master-servant relationship illustrates the colonial and missionary spirit of the time while adding dramatic tension, initial fear, then evolution towards complicity. At the time of the first critiques, Alexander Selkirk draws attention. The London public, already aware of his story from accounts published between 1710 and 1712, seeks to connect him to Defoe's novel. Questioned in taverns or by emerging journalists, he has to answer about his diet, health, and the veracity of certain anecdotes. In a world where information circulates slowly, he becomes an object of curiosity, a living witness of a feat, surviving alone on an island, better than any other known Englishman or Scotsman. But he derives no financial benefit. The copyright laws, established by the Statute of Anne in 1710, benefit writers and printers, and Defoe gives him nothing. His notoriety grows, but his economic returns remain null. This situation fosters both pride and discomfort in Selkirk. He would have liked his experience to serve as an example, but observes that Defoe exaggerates some aspects and alters others. Where he had survived a few years, Crusoe spends 28. Selkirk is irritated by the invention of the character Friday and the moralizing tone of the novel. He feels dispossessed of his account, as is often the case with sailors who, not being very literate, see their adventures rearranged by writers eager to please the public. In 1719, The Life and Strange Surprising Adventures of Robinson Crusoe experiences at least 4 reprints. Defoe publishes 2 sequels the same year, The Farther Adventures of Robinson Crusoe and Serious Reflections. During The Life and Surprising Adventures of Robinson Crusoe, while the public seeks adventure and realism, the author emphasizes moral reflections. Readers see in it an example of British resilience, a symbol of a commercial and conquering England that triumphs over all the seas. The success of Robinson Crusoe marks a turning point. Literarily, it accelerates the emergence of the modern novel in English, mixing psychological realism and spiritual lessons. Culturally, Crusoe embodies not only an adventure hero, but also an entrepreneur of his own life. This vision, where a man can reinvent himself in the face of adversity, still resonates today. Gradually, the name Robinson Crusoe erases that of Selkirk. Only the maritime world remembers that the Scot, born in 1676 in Lower Largo in Fife, served as the source for the story. Defoe, concerned about his debts and his reputation as a writer, exploits this literary vein and publishes other works inspired by real events, such as Moll Flanders or A Journal of the Plague Year. An attentive observer of the geopolitics and social changes of his country, he conceives Robinson Crusoe as more than an entertainment, a moral guide on the man's destiny faced with the inexplicable. The veracity of Robinson Crusoe sparks debates. Charles Gildon accuses Defoe of deception by passing off a tale as an autobiography, while others admire the plausibility of the story. In London, people discuss biblical passages deemed excessive in an adventure story and try to untangle the sources. Between Woodes Rogers, who reports Selkirk's story, and William Dampier, Defoe draws inspiration from both resilient sailors and personal reflections on providence. Proponents of the novel see it as the struggle of man against original sin. Skeptics see it as grandiloquent amplification. Comparing with other contemporary documents reveals the composite nature of the work. The island borrows as much from the Caribbean as from the Juan Fernandez archipelago. Some details recall Henry Pittman or Huguenot colonists more than Selkirk himself. The prayers and doubts also remind us of Moravian narratives. The literati of the 18th century, sometimes linked to the Royal Society, are amused and conduct investigations, going so far as to send questionnaires to navigators or publish calls for testimonies. Alexander Selkirk, whose survival inspired Defoe, experiences a mix of pride and resentment. The pride stems from public recognition. In taverns, he is asked for his tales of goat hunting, fishing, or shelter building. The resentment arises from his absence of mention on the cover and the lack of profits. Defoe, in debt, freely exploits shipwreck tales and maritime stories, which he considers to be the Commonwealth. Robinson Crusoe, however, becomes an admired figure. Artists illustrate him clothed in goat skins, gun on shoulder, rudimentary umbrella in hand, and sermons use him to celebrate Providence. The novel quickly enjoys international diffusion. Translated into German, French, and Dutch, it sparks a debate in France between English curiosity and universal message. In the Holy Roman Empire, moral elements are highlighted for the Lutheran readership. In the Dutch Republic, it circulates thanks to Dutch merchants and is compared to travel stories from maritime companies. Thus, the figure of the believing castaway becomes a symbol of endurance beyond England. On sight, critics reproach Defoe for an idealized vision of colonization. Crusoe acts as absolute master, baptizes Friday, transforms the ecosystem, and departs shrouded in success. But his defenders remind that the island primarily represents the symbolic space of the Christian soul, a place of struggle against temptations and learning gratitude to God. At the time of reprints, Selkirk remains discreet. He lives between Scotland and London, avoiding literary circles. It has been claimed he met Defoe or an intermediary, but nothing proves it. He did not publish a full account of his stay on Juan Fernandez. Only fragments of conversations, notarial deeds, and articles remain. This documentary rarity highlights the porosity between fiction and reality at the beginning of the 18th century. Woodes Rogers had written a testimony intended to attract investors, while Defoe transformed the material by adding theology and introspection. His practice of pamphleteering, where he manipulated arguments and fictions, was a major asset in shaping the myth of Robinson Crusoe. In the original 1719 edition, Defoe's name does not appear. The title suggests an authentic testimony. The style and twists betray the fiction, but the blur seduces the public. Peddlers and booksellers play on the ambiguity, boosting sales. Readers want to judge for themselves the spiritual and doctrinal value of the narrative. Some critics praise the concrete style, close to a logbook, while others marvel at material details: dry powder, usable gun, tools without rust. These inconsistencies fuel fascination by highlighting the real difficulty of surviving alone. Success changes the lives of both men. Defoe experiences significant income for the first time, partially settles his debts, and broadens his readership. Selkirk becomes an archetype of an adventurer against his will, his Scottish identity fading behind Crusoe's figure. Some voices denounce the injustice, but the era provides no recognition for the source of inspiration. The general public is enthusiastic about the model of the providential castaway. Discussions arise about the preservation of food, spiritual discipline, or the relationship with God. Some also read it as a justification of imperialism, the island as a miniature empire where the European imposes order. Reissues insist on divine providence and the duty of Christian gratitude. Selkirk, meanwhile, simply talks about hunting, surviving scurvy, and protecting against the elements. He does not describe a spiritual journey, nor island governance. His statements contrast with the rich symbolism of the novel. This discrepancy fuels his frustration. He is questioned about Friday, cannibals, or biblical meditations he never experienced. His laconic answers reveal a pragmatic life, far from the dramatic theater created by Defoe. The moral and Protestant dimension that Defoe radiates in Robinson Crusoe aligns with the idea of the providential man cherished by some preachers and essayists. Before this novel, Defoe had already dealt with religion in his pamphlets, presenting himself as a moralist concerned with national integrity. In The Family Instructor, published in 1715, he emphasizes family religious education. The isolated sailor becomes for him a metaphor for the lost soul, dependent on God. In Robinson Crusoe, the hero's repentance occurs about a year after his arrival on the island, when he rediscovers the Bible, saved from the shipwreck. This inner conversion explains his daily piety and his desire to instruct Friday in the true religion. For a Protestant audience wary of a clergy deemed corrupt, the example of a man capable of cultivating his faith alone and remaining within orthodoxy had exemplary value, out of the world, but under the gaze of God. Simultaneously, the novel exalts a commercial and entrepreneurial dimension. A former merchant, Defoe insists on material precision, inventory of salvaged goods, construction of a fort and an enclosure, domestication of animals, cultivation of grains. Crusoe notes, calculates, and evaluates, embodying a capitalist spirit where methodical and relentless work leads to the accumulation of goods. Unlike Selkirk, limited to survival, Crusoe transforms the island into a laboratory of rationalization. In 18th century Europe, engaged in commercial expansion, This vision resonated with an English, Dutch, or French audience. Faced with this success, Selkirk's voice fades. Sensationalist journalists seek to gather his words, but he struggles to express himself. The accounts vary. Some highlight his rough appearance and beard, others describe him speaking in snippets, refusing to turn what he considered mere necessity into exploits. Weary, he does not contest Defoe's narrative dominance. The Royal Society sometimes invites him to scientifically describe the Juan Fernandez Islands, fauna, flora, climate, but these exchanges remain sporadic. The Selkirk case fits into an England marked by the end of the War of Spanish Succession between 1701 and 1713, and by commercial growth. Defoe, by merging sailors' accounts and a moral framework, invents a novel both realistic and allegorical. Selkirk, publicized by Woodes Rogers, unwittingly feeds this literary myth. Between 1712 and 1719, Defoe transitions from polemical pamphlets to a narrative prose that captures the religious, intellectual, and public atmosphere of his time, durably forging the image of the solitary castaway. Back in Scotland in 1711, Alexander Selkirk feels a blend of excitement and anxiety. After the privateer battles, the isolation on the island of Massa Tierra, and a worldwide journey to Asia, he is not the same man who left Lower Largo. Upon his arrival in Leith, the docks throng as they once did with sailors, fishermen, and dockworkers handling goods from the United Provinces and England. Yet everything seems foreign to him. The cries of seagulls, the morning mist, the lively taverns. Haunted by the shadow of his adventures, he struggles to find his place in this routine world. Selkirk returns discreetly on an English commercial ship. Many Scots then transit through the southern ports of Great Britain to avoid taxes and controls. Armed with his experience, he easily aligns with a captain with privateer sympathies. On the bridge, he gauges the growing influence of England over a Scotland still independent until the Act of Union of 1707. The Navigation Acts continue to hinder trade, prompting many merchants toward the smuggling of tobacco, textiles, or alcohol. Selkirk observes among his kin this disobedience as a mode of survival and protest. Upon his return, his family and neighbors had thought him lost at sea, killed by pirates, or returned wealthy. His prizes under Woodes Rogers leave him a small sum, with no great local influence. He intrigues with his wild appearance, worn clothes, and tales of a deserted island, sometimes questioned. Yet respect and fascination prevail when he speaks of hunting, survival, goatskins, or capturing galleons. But he only seeks some stability. He then meets Sophia Bruce, from a family of artisans. Their union, more than a fleeting attraction, arises from a mutual understanding. She listens to him recount storms, starvation, and Pacific wounds, despite the fright. They marry between 1712 and 1713 in a Fife church, during a modest and rainy ceremony, surrounded by a few loved ones. After the marriage, Selkirk attempts to reintegrate by joining fishermen from the Firth of Forth, who are active in herring fishing. The techniques remind him of his youth: modest boats, nets cast according to the tides, selling fish to wholesalers. He dedicates himself to it with zeal, but the repetitiveness tires him. The work rekindles his nostalgia for vast horizons and maritime adventures. In his journal, he notes how much the calm of fishing painfully contrasts with the intensity of adventure, a sentiment he often keeps from Sophia to preserve their balance. In addition to fishing, Selkirk is approached by merchants to distribute tobacco from the colonies. Despite the union with England, Scotland remains subjected to unfavorable trade regulations, prompting many local players to circumvent the law. Scottish ports, less monitored than London or Bristol, become hotbeds of smuggling. Selkirk, familiar with maritime routes and discreet negotiations, transports tobacco, rum, or sugar from neutral ships to coastal warehouses. Nocturnal navigations, concealed cargoes, and avoided patrols give him a double life, legal fisherman and risky smuggler. Sophia fears the severe penalties incurred, but Selkirk sees in it a way to regain the adrenaline of his former adventures. Gradually, the curiosity about his past as a castaway fades. The Scots, absorbed by their own difficulties, turn away from his stories, which were once relayed by London journals and then supplanted by other news, colonial tensions, commercial rivalries, European conflicts. Selkirk, neither a simple fisherman nor a privateer, lives an uncomfortable in-between. The distant sea continues to attract him, despite the memory of his trials. In 1717, he enlists in the Royal Navy, which is then strengthening its forces against piracy active in West Africa and the Caribbean. Selkirk joins the HMS Weymouth, a fourth-rate ship intended for patrols and interceptions. This enlistment offers him an escape from Scottish daily life and values his maritime expertise. The Weymouth leaves Great Britain in 1717 for the Atlantic, targeting pirates like Bartholomew Roberts and Edward England in the Gulf of Guinea. This area mixes slave trade, Portuguese gold convoys, French fabric merchants, and English officers imposing a fragile order. Yellow fever and malaria regularly strike the crews. Discipline on board is strict. Watch duties, health checks, maintenance of the deck, and cannons. Selkirk, drawing from his privateer experience, advises on approaches, boardings, and surprise effects. Without an official rank, he acts as a technical advisor, recognized for his robustness and exceptional survival. Royal Navy archives describe him as a Scot who survived extreme conditions. But more lucid than before, he proceeds with caution, relies on his faith, and plans each mission carefully. On board the HMS Weymouth, the illegal slave trade frequently comes up in discussions. England entrusts the trade of slaves, gold, and ivory to companies like the Royal African Company, but private merchants and pirates bypass these monopolies. The sailors express their discomfort with the overcrowded holds, while the officers oscillate between obeying orders to suppress piracy and accommodating authorized slavers. Selkirk, who had already seen captives in the Iberian colonies, discovers the scale of this system integrated into the maritime economy. He obeys orders, but reflects on his own past solitude. He was free on his island. Others are deprived of all freedom without hope of escape. The waters of the Gulf of Guinea are ravaged by yellow fever, transmitted as soon as the ships dock. Symptoms: headaches, sudden fever, jaundice, carry off sailors in a few days. The bark of quinquina, imported from South America, offers only limited relief. Each week, names are added to the ship's log, bodies are buried at sea in coarse shrouds. Selkirk, robust, escapes the attacks for a time, aware that hygiene remains a precarious defense. Off the coast of Senegal, the Weymouth monitors the shores. Around Gorée, where the French and Portuguese compete for trade, ships are suspected of trafficking. The officers hesitate between attacking or negotiating with the French authorities. The crew endures the heat, the thirst, the waiting. The water spoils in the barrels. Fevers strike again. Selkirk observes that these seemingly calm waters hide dangers more deadly than cannons. Soon, he himself is afflicted. A violent migraine forces him to leave his post. Then the fever rises with chills and nausea. Isolated, he receives quinine and some rudimentary care. His complexion yellows. He deliriously speaks of his island and his memories as a castaway. On December 13, 1721, off the coast of Senegal, Alexander Selkirk passes away, a victim of an invisible plague that strikes one of the most seasoned sailors of his time. No one has the time to organize grand funerals. The Royal Navy's instructions require a quick burial at sea to prevent the spread of the disease. It is unclear if a religious service is recited or if the body is placed in a weighted sail bag. In the hurry, some sailors offer a prayer, others cross themselves in silence, reflecting on the fragility of life in the face of tropical diseases. The waves erase any trace of this disappearance. For the British Navy, Selkirk is just a name in the registers, a sailor who died after a patrol in unhealthy waters. But those who knew his story know that he had achieved a unique feat by surviving alone on his island. He only lacked that bit of luck to escape yellow fever. After his death, the officers inventory his belongings, a systematic procedure to redistribute or repatriate personal effects. 2 books are noted, probably a Bible and perhaps a hymnal or a navigation guide, a pipe stored in a cloth bag, a dull knife in a makeshift sheath, and a compass with a scratched dial. No other valuables. Yet these meager possessions symbolize an entire life at sea. A book to nourish the spirit, a pipe for moments of respite, a knife for daily tasks, and a compass, an essential tool for the sailor. In the 17th and 18th centuries, travel literature and castaway stories enjoy significant success in Europe. These accounts, balancing authenticity and fiction, attract a public eager for adventures and distant lands. Merchants, ship owners, and sailors roam the seas in the service of England, the Dutch Republic, Spain, or France. Some, captured or abandoned, survive alone on almost unknown islands. Alexander Selkirk is the most famous, but other figures also mark this imaginary: Henry Pitman, Philip Ashton, Pedro Serrano. All share the trial of solitude, the confrontation with a hostile environment, and the search for some form of providence. These stories durably nourish the collective imagination of Robinsonades and insular isolation. Henry Pitman, an English surgeon born around the late 1650s, was involuntarily drawn into the Duke of Monmouth's rebellion against James II in 1685. Following the rebellion's failure, many supporters were deported to the colonies as forced labor. Pitman, though a civilian, was sent to Barbados, at the heart of sugarcane plantations, fueled by the slave trade and the servitude of European convicts. Unable to endure this regime, he escaped with a few companions aboard a canoe. After several days adrift in the Caribbean, they land on an inhospitable island, likely near Curaçao or the Las Aves archipelago. Without provisions or shelter, they must find fresh water, hunt seabirds, and face heat, storms, and disease. Pitman, as a surgeon, takes care of the injured and sick, emphasizing hygiene and wound care in this climate. The small community of castaways tries to organize collective survival despite tensions and discouragement. He finally manages to leave the island thanks to a passing ship or a makeshift boat. Back in England, he publishes his account in 1689, after the Glorious Revolution that brought William of Orange to the throne. Less known than Dampier or Woodes Rogers, Pitman embodies another figure of the castaway, not the voluntary adventurer, but the constrained political exile. At the beginning of the 18th century, piracy dominates the Caribbean and the American Atlantic, led by captains like Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, or Bartholomew Roberts, nicknamed Black Bart. Philip Ashton, born in New England around 1700 and a mere fisherman, is captured in June 1722 by Roberts, then on a campaign of captures. Forced to serve on board, he suffers threats and violence for refusing to join the pirate crew. After several months, he escapes during a stopover in the Bay of Roatan in present-day Honduras. Roatan, a wooded and sparsely populated island, served as a hideout for buccaneers. Ashton swims to the shore and finds himself alone, without food or tools. His testimony describes his survival thanks to coconuts, animal trapping, and a freshwater source, all while enduring mosquitoes and isolation. His greatest fear remains being caught and executed by the pirates. Unlike Selkirk, who had received some supplies, Ashton initially has only clothes and a basic knowledge of the fauna. In the humid climate of Roatan, he faces fevers and misery, building makeshift shelters. After several weeks, he notices human traces without knowing whether they belong to pirates or merchants. Eventually, a friendly ship allows him to leave the island. Back in the English colonies of North America, he writes his memoirs, which resonate widely because they remind of the dangers of these pirate-infested seas. His adventure, though brief, is part of the tradition of island narratives where ingenuity, Protestant faith, and adaptation to a hostile environment are central. In the mid-16th century, Pedro Serrano, a Spanish sailor, is said to have been shipwrecked in the Caribbean Sea, near Honduras or Nicaragua. Accounts describe a tiny island without vegetation, populated by birds. He survived several years thanks to turtles, shells, and fish, washed ashore by the swell, sheltering in a hut threatened by waves. The religious dimension is essential. Serrano invokes the Virgin and the saints to endure the ordeal. One version tells of his meeting with another castaway. Frightened of each other, they recognize each other through the sign of the cross, allowing them to cooperate for survival. A Spanish ship eventually rescues them. The reality of the story is unknown, but the figure of Serrano circulated in Hispanic literature and influenced the motif of the isolated castaway before the Protestant narratives of the 17th century. This story illustrates the spiritual aspect of shipwreck. The sailor, alone facing the elements, turns to faith. In the Catholic tradition, the saints and the Virgin take precedence. In Protestant accounts, the focus is on the Bible and providence. Both traditions converge on the idea that the ordeal strengthens faith and confers a special aura on the survivor. All these castaways share common themes of the future Robinsonade. Solitude is the central psychological challenge. Selkirk lived more than 4 years alone. Ashton, isolated, rarely met others. Pitman, surrounded by escapees, experienced the tensions of a small group without resources. Serrano, according to legend, moved from total isolation to the unsettling encounter with another survivor. Whether individual or collective, solitude confronts man with his limits and nourishes the literary narrative. Man stripped bare against hunger, thirst, and nature, cruel or saving. The idea of providence runs through most of the testimonies. Selkirk sees in the discovery of wild goats a providential aid. Pitman attributes his salvation to the appearance of a schooner, Ashton to the fortuitous approach of a friendly ship near Roatan. All invoke a higher protection: God, the saints, the Virgin, or a lucky fate. Prayer and spiritual reevaluation hold a central place. For Protestants, it is about divine will rewarding faith and perseverance. For Catholics, about the intercession of the saints. In any case, isolation highlights human fragility and the meaning of existence outside of society. Another theme is mastery over nature. Selkirk hunts goats, farms, and builds shelters. Pitman and his companions seek water, care, and fishing tools. Ashton, without instruments, must resort to rudimentary techniques. Serrano exploits shells, rain, and sun to subsist. The deserted island becomes a laboratory of ingenuity where man rediscovers primitive gestures, braiding, lighting a fire, navigating by the stars. But this mastery also leads to imbalances. Selkirk quickly reduces the number of goats, and the intensive use of wood causes partial deforestation. In the 17th and 18th centuries, these stories do not speak of ecology, but they already reveal a tension between survival and exploitation. Finally, the encounter with the other constitutes a recurring theme. Selkirk fears the Spanish, Ashton fears pirates, Pitman fears the colonial authorities. Serrano finds salvation in recognizing a sign of the cross. These confrontations, often with other Europeans, mark a turning point. Isolation ends, but uncertainty grows. As in the tradition of Robinsonades, this meeting becomes a mirror of oneself and a decisive moment. The motivations of the sailors vary according to their culture and beliefs. Ashton, a Protestant, questions divine grace. Was the man he met sent by God? Serrano, a Catholic, sees it as providence or the intercession of the Virgin. In all cases, the other is a potential deliverance factor, but can also represent a threat of captivity or violence. These stories reflect the geopolitical tensions of the time: English against Spanish, pirates against merchants, Protestants against Catholics. Manuscripts, logbooks, and published confessions circulated from port to port, fueling a European readership eager for transoceanic stories. These works presented isolation as a moral and religious challenge. For Protestants, a personal journey reinforced by the Bible and prayer. For Catholics, a miracle manifesting divine benevolence. The castaway, saved or rescued, returned transformed and invested with a mission: to share his experience, warn of the fragility of life at sea, or even rise socially by publishing his account. These testimonies also revealed unknown lands, their climates, their fauna, iguanas, howler monkeys, marine reptiles, and their fish-filled waters. Some writings included drawings or descriptions that stimulated the imagination. In England, they were used in sermons recalling divine protection, while scholarly circles debated the natural phenomena mentioned: trade winds, warm currents, coral reefs. The experiences of Pitman, Ashton, or Serrano were compared to those of famous navigators like Dampier or Cook to verify their geographical accuracy. Modern historiography reminds us that dozens of sailors were abandoned or isolated each year during maritime conflicts. The difference lay in their willingness to recount and publish their adventures. Official sources sometimes keep traces of a trial, such as Pitman's accused of rebellion, or an account of capture, like Ashton captured by pirates. In the Hispanic world, the myth of Pedro Serrano, although poorly documented, has been passed down through oral tradition and has influenced the collective imagination, like other Catholic legends of castaways in the Pacific or the Caribbean. The circulation of this maritime literature between Spanish, English, Dutch, and French favored its diffusion. Publishers translated and adapted the texts. Episodes deemed insignificant were omitted, heroic scenes amplified. References to Pitman are found even in English village publications, or to Serrano in Mexican colonial catechisms. Faith and adventure mingled, presenting the survivor sometimes as a repentant sinner, sometimes as God's knight. Modern analyses show that castaways often follow common patterns, searching for water, building a shelter, identifying food supplies, fruits, fish, birds. Then comes the consolidation of the habitat with livestock, harvesting, or storage. Subsequently, there is the alert phase, smoke signals, horizon surveillance, hope for rescue, or fear of a hostile encounter. For protection, some, like Selkirk, set up secure retreats in high places. The psychological dimension imposes itself when the weight drags on, discouragement or inner discipline through reading, prayer, or routine. The arrival of a ship then arouses hope or mistrust. Ashton feared being recaptured by pirates while hoping for rescue by an honest crew. These stories, rich in details about fauna, flora, construction techniques, and diseases, have fueled a literary genre where authenticity and adventure converge. Some historians believe that Henry Pitman's account, although little known, paved the way for the success of Robinson Crusoe. The legend of Serrano, for its part, found a particular resonance with a Catholic audience. Despite their differences in religion, climate, or context, these stories convey the same experience: human vulnerability in the face of forced insularity. On the anthropological level, isolation reactivates the primitive fear of social exclusion. The English or Scottish sailors, accustomed to naval discipline, were marked by the sudden disappearance of command and had to reorganize daily life. In the case of Pitman, his small community of escapees had to establish sharing rules to avoid mutinies. With Serrano, the arrival of another castaway raised the question of language, religion, and mutual trust. These dilemmas align with modern survival theories, which emphasize the importance of communication and a fair distribution of resources. The popularity of these stories in the 17th and 18th centuries reflects a fascination with the boundary between civilization and nature, represented by the island. European ports teemed with tales of maritime fortunes, but the stories of castaways stood out for their moral and emotional intensity. The public pondered their own ability to survive without civilization. For the Church, these tales illustrated divine grace or punishment. For governments, they reminded of the harshness of maritime life, although the Navy and companies continued to recruit massively. The recurring presence of pirates, like Bartholomew Roberts in the case of Ashton, or the threat of Spanish galleons for Pitman and Selkirk, finally reminds us that the ocean was also a field of military and economic confrontation. Privateers, buccaneers, and mercenaries posed a constant danger. Abandonment on an island could be the result of an accident, storm, injury, mutiny, or deliberate punishment. Even if Pitman, Ashton, or Serrano do not always speak of it directly, this background is evident, giving the modern reader a glimpse of the permanent risks linked to navigation at that time. The fundamental themes, solitude, providence, mastery of the environment, encounter with the other, intertwine in these tales, whether documented or legendary. They reveal spiritual and moral stakes beyond confessional boundaries, as well as a thirst for knowledge and exoticism that marked modern Europe. These stories are a bridge between geographical knowledge, individual achievement, and religious meditation. Above all, they remind us that at sea, man often finds himself alone, facing the vastness of the waves. In the early 18th century, London experienced a cultural effervescence, fueled by tales of adventure and curiosity for distant lands. In April 1719, the anonymous publication of The Life and Strange, Surprising Adventures of Robinson Crusoe quickly drew the attention of theatrical troops. That same year, the story was adapted for the stage and multiplied until 1722. The theaters of the West End, such as Drury Lane and Lincoln's Inn Fields, vied with ingenuity to stage a deserted island, exotic adventures, and a solitary castaway, appealing to both novelty-loving bourgeois and sailors on leave. Spectators discovered simple yet evocative sets, jungle-painted canvases, wave sounds backstage, sometimes even live goats. Music, dance, and pantomime were added in the spirit of the complete entertainment then in vogue. The plays, loosely inspired by the novel, amplified certain episodes to increase interest. The arrival of the indigenous companion, renamed or given a singular character, was as entertaining as Robinson's solitude. Few spectators knew Alexander Selkirk as the source of inspiration. The posters mostly announced a surprising show or a comic drama, obscuring the real basis of the story. London society at the time had a keen interest in tales of sailors, privateers, and explorers spread in gazettes and taverns. The adaptations of Robinson Crusoe were part of this broader maritime craze. Between 1719 and 1722, there are at least 4 major adaptations, not to mention unofficial versions performed outside of London. These performances made the story accessible even to the illiterate and helped make it a central element of English popular culture. The rapid translation of the novel into French, German, and Dutch ensured its international spread. While the plays differed from the original text, exoticism and survival drama remained the essential ingredients to attract crowds and build the lasting reputation of the story. The iconography of Robinson Crusoe was born almost at the same time as the first stage adaptations. British engraver William Hogarth, known for his satirical prints like A Rake's Progress, also created sketches inspired by the solitary castaway, a sign of the story's rapid impact. Disseminated in shops and bourgeois salons, these images set the visual archetype of the castaway clad in skins, rudimentary gun in hand. Robinson appeared sometimes as a wild man close to nature, sometimes as a biblical preacher with a long beard and holding a Bible. At the beginning of the 19th century, French illustrator Granville, Jean-Ignace Isidore Girard, produced illustrated editions for the French-speaking public. His engravings, with a dreamy and humorous style, rekindled interest in the story in Europe. Young readers, fascinated by the image of the hero dressed in skins and surrounded by animals, saw in him an ingenious sailor, cultivating the land and raising goats. This iconography associated itself with other adventure stories, reinforcing the idea of a wild island and a self-taught hero. The circulation of Granville's illustrated books and engravings consolidated the novel's fame in France, Germany, and Italy. Literary magazines and imitations spread the motif of the bearded Robinson, associating every distant journey with his adventure. Thus, the work transcended the text to become a visual and imaginary universe, Robinson standing as a symbol of perseverance and cleverness against the elements. In the Victorian 19th century, Great Britain turned Robinson Crusoe into an educational and imperial myth. Reprints multiplied, and literary tourism developed around Alexander Selkirk, a Scottish sailor identified as the hero's model. In Lower Largo, his birthplace in Fife, Scotland, the arrival of the railway attracted visitors in search of his traces. In 1885, a monument was erected in his honor, depicting a sailor turned towards the sea. This statue became a local landmark and a romantic attraction. At the time of British imperial expansion, Selkirk symbolized both the courage of an isolated explorer and the maritime power of the kingdom. Visitors retraced his journey, attempting to reconcile his real adventures with the already famous literary versions. Curiosity about Selkirk's figure was part of the rise of the adventure novel, driven by authors like H. Rider Haggard and R.L. Stevenson. The Victorian era, marked by exploration and colonial narratives, saw survival on an island as an allegory of the civilizing mission of the English and Scots. Lower Largo became a tourist site, feeding the image of a solitary and independent hero. This Victorian rediscovery illustrates the enduring impact of the legend in British consciousness, reinforced by imperial ideology. The Juan Fernandez Archipelago off the coast of Chile also played an important role in this construction. In 1966, archaeologist Tomás Bartlett conducted excavations on the island of Mas a Tierra, renamed Isla Robinson Crusoe, to confirm Selkirk's presence. He discovered rough foundations, European musket handles from the early 18th century, and metal fragments possibly from recycled utensils. Although it is difficult to prove these remains were exclusively related to Selkirk, Bartlett compared them to testimonies from Woodes Rogers and Spanish sailors. His findings, published in South America, concluded the likelihood of a campsite attributable to the Scottish sailor. These studies reignited public and historians' interest in the material traces of the legend. In the 21st century, two studies renewed the analysis. In 2001, Diana Suhami published a biography of Selkirk, examining his psychology and survival strategies, fire, water, adaptation to climate. She recontextualized the adventure within the framework of piracy and British geopolitical issues, deconstructing the romantic fables. In 2007, John Howell conducted a comparative study to measure Selkirk's influence on Daniel Defoe. He consulted correspondences, Royal Society reports, and editions of the novel. According to him, Defoe drew inspiration from multiple sources: William Dampier, Woodes Rogers, Henry Pittman. Selkirk was just one element among others. However, the proximity between his return in 1711 and the publication of Robinson Crusoe in 1719 argues for a direct link. Howell's analyses fueled the debate. Some saw it as an obvious lineage, others as a diffuse influence in a broader contemporary context. At the heart of these discussions lies an essential challenge: what makes a legend? The figure of Alexander Selkirk has emerged as the quintessential example of the solitary castaway, rightly or wrongly. The first readers of Defoe were unaware of this Scottish sailor, but subsequent criticism and modern audiences have sought to anchor the fiction in tangible historical fact. The idea that a real Robinson existed illustrates a common need to tie the imaginary to a real testimony in order to give it authenticity. Yet, Defoe was aware of other castaway stories, like those of Henry Pittman or Robert Knox, and the deserted island was not new in adventure literature. In popular opinion, the conviction that there existed a flesh-and-blood Robinson remains strong. Statues, relics, or locations like Lower Largo and Juan Fernandez Island offer visitors the illusion of touching the reality of a myth. Every archaeological discovery, pottery, inscriptions, piles of stones, can reignite media and scientific interest, with press articles and debates about the validity of datings. For literary historians, the confrontation between the real survival story and the fiction of Robinson Crusoe illustrates how a text draws from facts to become a moral and philosophical allegory. The controversy surrounding Selkirk highlights the boundary between the lived experience of a forgotten sailor and the creation of a universal hero. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the public's taste for the Bible and moral sermons directed reprints towards Providence and Robinson's spiritual resilience. Selkirk, a former mutineer with a fiery temperament, did not fit this ideal. Some believe that Defoe deliberately transformed practical elements into theological lessons. Current debates seek to distinguish what comes from Selkirk, such as goat hunting or building a fortified shelter, and what stems from other maritime testimonies. The result pits those who link the story to Selkirk's biography against those who see Robinson Crusoe as a literary phenomenon nourished by multiple sources. The first biographies, from the late 18th century, cast him as the founding father of the myth, but recent studies emphasize the lack of certainty. The legend has been enriched by stories of other sailors and oral traditions, so much so that the image of the castaway of Masa Tierra is tinged with varied influences. Despite this ambiguity, Selkirk's popularity has continued to grow, driven by the allure of solitary adventure and reflection on man's relationship with nature. It is remarkable that, up to the contemporary era, academics, writers, and the general public still debate the link between Selkirk and Robinson, a sign that the theme transcends anecdote. Biblical or historical analyses, inscriptions in sailors' Bibles, comparisons between Defoe's language and Dampier's logbooks, enrich a puzzle where each discovery can upset the established order. Advocates of Selkirk's crucial importance recall Woodes Rogers' statements and the publicity around the Scottish castaway upon his return. They emphasize the tight chronology, which makes it plausible that Defoe knew of his adventures and used them as the story's core. Other researchers find it reductive to limit it to that, reminding us that Defoe, a great reader of exploration accounts, had access to other testimonies of men abandoned in the Caribbean or the Indian Ocean. The debates have been renewed with cultural criticism, analyzing the projection of social concerns onto the figure of the castaway. Debates about authenticity, did Selkirk really experience it, have been tinged with post-colonial issues linked to Friday and marginalized indigenous peoples. The myth of Robinson Crusoe thus does not rest solely on a biographical fact, but on the flexibility of a narrative addressing universal themes: solitude, ingenuity, religion, and encounter with the other. Selkirk thus fades behind a legendary hybridization that surpasses him. In the 21st century, Juan Fernandez and Lower Largo have appropriated this memory in different ways. In the Scottish locality, the image of the stranded sailor remains a cultural and tourist asset: guides, brochures, commemorative sculptures. In the archipelago, renamed Robinson Crusoe Island, the fame attracts travelers with museums, signage, and hiking trails. Chilean authorities seek a balance between preserving a fragile ecosystem, rich in endemic species, and developing ecotourism based on the legend. The issues of historical memory thus intersect with ecological considerations. Should the legacy of a colonial privateer be valued at the expense of natural preservation? And to what extent does the story of an abandoned Scotsman belong to Chilean identity? Academic research maintains interest in Selkirk's experience by studying period correspondences, Admiralty archives, and privateer registers. The manuscripts of Woodes Rogers, preserved in Oxford and London, are essential for confirming or contesting the idea that his survival inspired English literature. Each new document, archaeological vestige, or variation of oral tradition can rekindle enthusiasm. The story continues to evolve according to cultural, social, and scientific stakes. There is interest in the construction of a myth and how a news item, enriched with embellishments, has influenced world literature. The debate on Selkirk's influence compared to other sources remains inexhaustible, as it is less about establishing a truth than capturing the polymorphism of a legend that, since the 18th century, has fueled the universal imagination.